Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the honourable member for Hornsey and Wood Green for bringing this important debate forward on the work of women defending human rights globally, and pointing out, importantly, that the path set by the suffragettes in the UK in securing votes for women has been very important in that road, and her well-informed and comprehensive opening speech. And in the spirit of celebrating human rights defenders, as this debate seeks to do, I want to focus on paying tribute to the fact that across the world, as we've heard, across the world, we see women, ordinary women, committing acts of great self-sacrifice in the face of persistent abuse, threats to personal safety, persecution, and subject to violence, simply for standing up for what is right. All of us who believe in human rights for all Western democracies certainly, have a duty to stand shoulder to shoulder with these women and do all we can to support them. All states who believe in freedom should use every diplomatic means and avenue at their disposal to secure human rights for all. No ifs, no buts. We should support all those women who stand up for human rights in countries where women are seen as no more than chattels, the legal property of their closest male relatives, such as in Saudi Arabia. Women all around the world are denied their basic human rights simply because they are women. And this is something about which we all need to talk and learn more. And I learned much from listening to the speech from the honourable member for Leeds and North West about the situation in Papua. Reference has been made to the appalling situation in Saudi Arabia by the honourable member for Hornsey and Wood Green. In such regimes where so-called wrongdoing, such as women campaigning to be permitted to learn to drive, is sufficient to put one's very life in danger. Now, we who believe in freedom must have the courage to stand up to these regimes and support these women instead of turning a blind eye. We talk much in the West about the contribution of women in Western societies, but we betray the women living under misogynistic regimes, and such regimes are misogynistic, as the honourable member for Leeds North West pointed out, where women have a much lower status than men, and we betray these women when we stay silent about their plight. We all welcome, and we've heard today about the recent decision in the Saudi regime to allow women to drive. According to some folk in Saudi, the lifting of this ban is controversial, since they believe letting women drive will lead to women becoming promiscuous. But we need to remember that last year, in the month before this ban was lifted, as we've heard from the Honourable Lady for Hornsey and Wood Green, more than a dozen female activists who had campaigned for the right to drive were rounded up and put in jail. At least 9 of them remain in prison, and families of the activists say they have been tortured and put in solitary confinement for long periods. No formal charges have been brought against these women, only a series of accusations of them being involved in a foreign plot against the government. Now, it's been pointed out to me, and I'm sure to many of us, that we should have a care for cultural sensitivities. Now, Mr Chair, I'm sure we're all in favour of being mindful of cultural sensitivities, but we must not be complicit with our silence towards a regime which believes that women are not actually equal to men in any sense of the word. They're not allowed to go out on their own unless they're accompanied by their male owners, that they can be cruelly treated and imprisoned for having the temerity to hope that they should be seen as individuals in their own right, instead of a possession of another male, all in the name of cultural sensitivities. When you are silent in the face of others being repressed, you become a friend of the oppressor, or perhaps even a useful idiot for the oppressor, if you continue relations with that state as though it were not a tyrannical regime, and that will simply not do. There is deep concern caused by the reports of torture and ill-treatment of detained women's rights defenders in Saudi Arabia. They have been imprisoned since mid-2018 solely for peacefully campaigning for the protection and promotion of human rights, including women's rights. Some were detained incommunicado, with no access to their families or lawyers during the first 3 months of their detention, and subject to chilling smear campaigns by state media. They all remain without access to legal representation. Now, recent reports have emerged that some of the detained women activists have been subjected to electric shocks, flogging, sexual threats and other forms of torture. Testimonies recount that this abuse has left some of the women unable to walk or stand properly, with uncontrolled shaking and marks on their bodies. At least one of them has attempted suicide on several occasions. These women have long been advocating for Saudi's women's rights to drive, and they have called for an end to the discriminatory male guardianship system and have peacefully campaigned for greater respect for human rights. For this, they risk being tried and sentenced before the Specialist Criminal Court, the country's counter-terrorism court. Now, in 2016, the UN Committee Against Torture, in its second periodic report of Saudi Arabia, expressed concern at the application of terrorism legislation through the Specialised Criminal Court, which enables the criminalisation of acts of peaceful expression considered as endangering national unity or undermining the reputation or position of the state. These regulations have been used to try human rights defenders for exercising their fundamental rights, violate international standards for the right to a fair trial, and have enabled authorities to detain individuals without providing them with access to legal representation during the investigation phase. As further recommended by the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in March 2018, the Saudi state should facilitate women's access to justice and institutionalise legal aid that is accessible, sustainable and responsible to the needs of women. Now, if it were not so serious, Mr Chair, it would be laughable that Saudi Arabia is actually a member of the UN Human Rights Council and, as such, is obligated to uphold the highest standards for the promotion and protection of human rights and to cooperate fully with the Council's mechanisms. However, the Saudi government has been largely uncooperative with the Council and continues to exhibit a flagrant disregard for fundamental freedoms. My concern is that the international community seeks to stay on good terms with this rich and powerful state at any cost, and the Saudi prince knows this. So where is the motivation to care about international opinion from Saudi Arabia? I urge the Minister and the UK Government to lead attempts to bring pressure to bear on the Saudi Government to persuade it that its action is simply incompatible with civilised, modern codes of behaviour. Halting UK arms sales to a country which deals in terror, killing and oppression would be a good start. And of course, as we've heard from the Honourable Lady from Glasgow Central, it would certainly immediately benefit the people of Yemen. And it's worth noting that the Saudi government requires visiting reporters to be accompanied by a government minder. That really says it all. But I also want to challenge the UK Minister to have the UK government lead support for all women human rights defenders in the international community, as pointed out by the Honourable Lady for Hornsey and Wood Green. As the Honourable Member for Glasgow Central pointed out, our constituents really care about these matters. I will indeed.
I apologise, my plane was late and I run the whole way here, so I'm just catching my breath. I just want to say one thing. The Honourable Lady's referred to many ladies back home. I have a lady back home, just referred to her as this here. Women have been to the forefront of human rights defence for many years, and it's past time that women like Maud Kells from Northern Ireland, who has spent 50 years providing maternity care for Congolese women and even returned after being shot by a bandit, and whilst in the missionary hospital she helped to found. Women like these, as the Honourable Lady says, deserve recognition and utmost respect, and that's what today's debate is all about, giving women the recognition that they very rightly deserve.
I fully agree with the Honourable Gentleman's contribution, and indeed the amazing thing about the women that he talks about is that they are ordinary women and they are doing extraordinary things in some of the most barbaric conditions and regimes. Women human rights defenders not only face the challenges and attacks suffered by male human rights defenders, but due to the historic and structural inequalities in power relations and discrimination, they suffer more. They suffer heightened risks and acts of violence because of their gender and the specific, often marginalised human rights issues that they work on. For example, women human rights defenders are more likely to experience sexualised smear campaigns, sexual assault and rape, including at police stations. And the targeting of their children also takes place, but also sometimes marginalisation within their own movements and communities, which must be extremely difficult to bear. And that's why this debate is important. We cannot forget We must not forget the struggles and risks women human rights defenders face every single day. They stand up to repression, barbarity and cruelty every single day, risking everything to have the kinds of rights and freedoms that we in the West take for granted. They must not be forgotten, no matter how rich or how powerful or how important the state perpetrating the oppression happens to be. It is right we celebrate them and salute their courage and stand beside them in their struggle. And I'm really looking forward to hear how the Minister intends to put the UK at the forefront of those efforts.